Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And by way of introduction of our first subject tonight, there's this.
There is only one animal who can tell you if she is happy and wants to mate. That is Koko the silverback gorilla.
Well, that was Robin Williams, whose podcast we've done, talking about Koko the silverback gorilla, who died recently at the age of 46. Here's the New York Post on the death of Koko. Koko, the thoughtful gorilla who captivated the world through her ability to use sign language and revealed an empathetic side to great apes, has died at 46. The western lowland gorilla passed away in her sleep Tuesday morning at the Gorilla Foundation's preserve in California's Santa Cruz Mountains, the foundation said. Koko touched the lives of millions as an ambassador for all gorillas and an icon for interspecies communication and empathy, the foundation said on its website. She was beloved and will be deeply missed. Koko was believed to have had an IQ of between 75 and 95 and could sign more than 1,000 words. The average IQ of a human is around 90 to 110. She also understood spoken English. Born at the San Francisco Zoo, the gentle, nearly 300-pound ape began learning sign language as a baby in 1974 from Dr. Francine Penny Patterson as part of a Stanford University project. She spent her entire life in captivity and became a celebrity in her own right. Her remarkable ability to sign landed her on the cover of National Geographic twice. In 1978, in a photo she took of herself in a mirror, and again in 1985 with an image of her mourning the death of one of her pet kittens. Throughout her life, Koko adopted several felines using sign language to give them names like All Ball, Lipstick, and Smokey. She was gifted a box of kittens on her 44th birthday. Her love of animals spawned the children's book Koko's Kittens and her own branded line of toys. In 2012, she stunned scientists by playing wind instruments, including the recorder, harmonica, and party favor whistles, an ability that showed primates can learn to control their breathing. Controlled breathing was believed to be beyond their ability. Koko met a slew of celebrities over the years, like Betty White, Leonardo DiCaprio, and the late Robin Williams, who shared hugs and laughs with the gorilla during their 2001 encounter. Her impact has been profound, and what she has taught us about the emotional capacity of gorillas and their cognitive abilities will continue to shape the world, the foundation said. This is our second Koko podcast. I refer you to our podcast on Koko the dog about a year ago. I think this Koko was a little smarter. We're going to move on now to our featured Charles Krauthammer, who died recently at the age of 68, probably the most brilliant columnist and political commentator of our era. He was a nice Jewish boy from Montreal who went to medical school at Harvard, graduated at the top of his class, left medicine, went to Washington, and used his gift for writing and speaking to become one of the most respected voices in the country. He was a lapsed Democrat who became a conservative. Many of his pieces were published in the National Review, who wrote of him, in a fractured media environment where almost no one commands universal respect, where crudity of expression and thought are increasingly the norm, and where most commentators feel compelled to cater to their base, Krauthammer was admired across the political spectrum, unfailingly elegant and civil, and stubbornly independent-minded. He was a regular panelist at Fox with Bret Baier, and here Bret Baier profiles the life of Charles Krauthammer.
It's my job to call a folly a folly.
Charles Krauthammer, columnist, author, and Fox News commentator, lived his life telling others exactly what he thought.
You're betraying your whole life if you don't say what you think, and you don't say it honestly and bluntly.
It was that quality that brought Charles to Fox News Channel during Brit Hume's tenure as anchor.
This is not a man designed for television. You look at him and say, this is not a potential TV star. In fact, he became a huge star, even I would almost say a megastar on this channel. And it was the sheer force of his intellect and the power of his thinking. And on top of that, there was a gentleness about him personally that if he disagreed with you, you never felt attacked. He just disagreed with you.
It was always unspoken on the panel that he was always the leader because of his delivery, his intellect.
Special report stage manager Mary Pat Dennert was on set with Charles every night for years.
It was kind of an ongoing joke on the panel that Bret Baier has a signal when people need to wrap up. I give him 30, so Bret puts his arm out. And Charles was on the show forever, and we always laughed that I don't think he paid attention to that once. He had something to say, he was going to say it. No time constraints were going to control him on that.
Born in 1950s New York to Jewish parents who left World War II-era Europe, Charles' father raised his son to value the pursuit of knowledge.
His motto for us was, I want you to know everything. I want you to learn everything. You don't have to do everything, but you got to know everything. He thought that was part of life.
The family lived in Montreal and summered at their cottage in Long Beach, New York.
It was a paradisiacal childhood. My brother and I were inseparable. He always insisted I be included, so I got used to being around the big boys and taking the slings and arrows, and that's how you get toughened up.
As a senior at McGill University in Canada, Krauthammer became captivated by political journalism. He applied to medical school to appease his family and was accepted to Harvard. But Krauthammer put off attending and enrolled at Oxford instead. It was there that he met fellow student from Australia, Robin Trethewey, who would later become his wife. Charles reversed course and headed back to the U.S. to attend Harvard.
Why did you choose psychiatry? I was looking for something halfway between the reality of medicine and the elegance, if you like, of philosophy. So psychiatry was the obvious thing.
It was there that one unexpected moment, a tragic diving accident, changed Charles' life forever.
It just hit at precisely the angle where all the force was transmitted to one spot, and that is the cervical vertebra, which severed the spinal cord.
When did you realize that the accident was life-altering?
The second it happened.
Despite his permanent paralysis, Charles astounded his professors and classmates by graduating on time, near the top of his class. Ultimately, he decided the field wasn't for him, a career reversal he joked about on Fox decades later.
I'm a psychiatrist in remission, doing very well. I haven't had a relapse in 25 years.
In 1978, Krauthammer headed to Washington, D.C. for a government job.
I thought, once I'm in Washington, isn't that where they do politics? One thing will lead to another.
Robert encouraged him to follow his dreams, and he soon landed at the left-leaning New Republic magazine, just as the Reagan administration took office. Krauthammer found himself agreeing with the new president and questioning his own feelings about the Democratic Party.
I ended up supporting just about every element of the Reagan foreign policy.
Months after Reagan's re-election, Krauthammer penned the phrase, "the Reagan Doctrine," in a provocative Time magazine column, and the name stuck.
He created the Reagan Doctrine. Nobody had heard of it. Charles put together a piece and dubbed it, and, I've read it many times, and it just holds up so well. And I think Charles discovered then that there really was a lot to Reagan.
But it would take years before Charles fully embraced domestic conservative ideals.
It took me about a decade. I was skeptical of tax cuts. I was skeptical of smaller government at the beginning. And then by the end of the 80s, I had begun to change.
In 1985, his son Daniel was born. And 2 years later, Charles won the biggest honor in journalism, the Pulitzer Prize. But it was the events of September 11, 2001, that brought a more forceful tone to his commentary and a regular spot on the special report panel. Over the years, Charles became an audience favorite. Despite all of his accomplishments, awards, and high-profile endorsements, Krauthammer was always humble and at times uneasy with the influence his words held.
I think about it, and I find it worrisome. The reason is that when I was totally unknown, I could say anything I damn well pleased.
That included when his opinions reached presidents.
Read Charles Krauthammer's column in the Post today. He's a brilliant man.
Well, when you get praise from President Clinton and you're from my side of the aisle, that means that my career's done. I mean, I'm toast.
Krauthammer's high standards for political leaders were bipartisan for President Obama.
When I think he's done just about everything wrong.
To then candidate Donald Trump.
This is the strongest field of Republican candidates in 35 years. You could pick a dozen of them at random and have the strongest cabinet America's had in our lifetime. And instead, all our time is spent discussing this rodeo clown.
Charles had other loves aside from politics. He played chess and was an avid baseball fan.
I grew up playing the game. I left to play the game.
And loved nothing more than seeing his Washington Nationals play and win.
Know the glory. With the White House on fire, the Congress in chaos, and the world going to hell in a handbasket, we need happy news like this. This is why God created baseball late on the sixth day.
Friends at Fox News Channel remember that quick wit and Charles' love for talking to anyone.
The Special Report has a lot of people that come in and watch it, and they were always in awe of Charles and always very, apprehensive about approaching him. And I would always say, please go say something to him, he would love to talk to you, and he was always so friendly to everyone.
In 2013, Krauthammer released a book, Things That Matter, and summed up the survivor's spirit that has guided much of his life, writing, quote, "The catastrophe that awaits everyone from a single false move, wrong turn, fatal encounter. Every life has such a moment. What distinguishes us is whether and how we ever come back."
There's an element of that in everybody's story, their low point. Do you want it enough, and are you lucky enough? That's a part of it, too.
In mid-June, doctors had given him just weeks to live, writing, "I leave this life with no regrets. It was a wonderful life, full and complete, with the great loves and great endeavors that make it worth living. I am sad to leave, but I leave with the knowledge that I lived the life that I intended."
I intend to die at my desk.
Final word on Charles Krauthammer is what Edward R. Murrow said of Winston Churchill, who not surprisingly was one of Krauthammer's heroes. He mobilized the English language and sent it into battle. We're going to move on now to Donald Hall, who died recently at the age of 89, one of the most important poets in America in the last generation. He was writing since 1950, and he became the Poet Laureate of the United States in 2006. He was also a big baseball fan, Red Sox fan, and he wrote a biography of Doc Ellis, the idiosyncratic pitcher for the Pirates, and he attempted a biography of Charles Lawton, but Lawton's wife, Elsa Lancaster, killed it. And that's something I'd like to know more about. Anyway, here he talks about when he was a teenager in New England and his beginnings as a poet.
I had the lead in the high school senior play when I was a freshman, but by the time the sophomore play came around, I took a minor part, turning down the major part, because I wanted to concentrate on poetry entirely. And there was one particular event that did that. I occasionally went to Boy Scouts. I had to take a bus or a trolley to Boy Scouts, and I never took to Boy Scouts much. Like, I remained a tenderfoot, but it was a way to get out of the house. One night I was talking with an elderly Boy Scout, a 16-year-old, when I was 14, and I was a freshman in high school. We were sort of bragging at each other, beginning to get to know each other. I said that I had written a poem in study hall that day, and he said, "You write poems?" And I said, "Yes, do you?" And he, at 16, said, "It is my profession." It's a wonderful thing. There's an old movie called Bonnie and Clyde where Clyde says, "We rob banks." Very cool, very cool. But I felt that was like "We rob banks." He was a guy named Dave Johnstone, and he was a nice guy. We started talking about poetry, and he knew about modern poetry. He knew about T.S. Eliot and Wallace Stevens, who lived just up the street in Hartford, Connecticut. We also had a textbook in high school where I began to find some modern poems. But it was Dave Johnstone in particular. I used to go see him, maybe as much as once a week, to talk about poetry. He lived in New Haven, just a few miles from me. Because he was in New Haven and Yale University was there, he knew some, say, 18-year-olds who were literary guys at Yale. So I actually got, at the age of 14, to hang around with some 18-year-old Yale guys who were talking about poetry. I was full of hero worship for these people who wanted to be poets or spend their lives with poetry, or the poets themselves. And again, I saved up my money. I bought collected poems of T.S. Eliot in cloth for $2.50. Took it home with me. I still have it. It's in my study right here. And I annotated it at 14, where Eliot at the beginning of The Wasteland dedicates that poem for Ezra Pound, Il Miglior Fabbro. I wrote Nertz because I knew by that time that Ezra Pound was broadcasting for Mussolini to the American troops. And I wrote misspelled, 14-year-old pretentious, you know. Eliot wrote, "I show you fear in a handful of dust." And I wrote epigrammatic symbolism, misspelling both epigrammatic and symbolism. At the same time, I was cutting down my load in the school play, instead of rehearsing all afternoon, coming back, going up to my bedroom and closing the door and writing poems.
I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. As a final tribute to Donald Hall, I thought we would play some Grieg in the Hall of the Mountain King.